Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, tell me if this sounds familiar. You're looking at a stock, you see a super high book value, and you instantly think, wow, guaranteed bargain, right? Well, it's actually one of the biggest traps in financial analysis and investing. We see this crisp, clean number on a balance sheet and kind of just assume it represents rock-solid reality. But honestly, it's really only telling part of the story. Today, we're going to break down exactly what book value per share actually measures, how to calculate it for your exams, and most importantly, why relying on it blindly can completely derail your financial analysis. Let's get into it.
Here's the roadmap for today's exam-friendly explainer. We'll be hitting 1. Defining book value. 2. The basic calculation. 3. Preferred stock complications. 4. 4 serious limitations. And finally, 5. Book versus market value.
Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, Defining Book Value.
So here is the formal definition. Book value per share is the amount of net assets available to the common shareholders, divided by the number of common shares outstanding. Now, the absolute key phrase here I want you to focus on is available to the common shareholders. This metric is all about residual wealth. Think of common shareholders as being literally the absolute last in line. If a company were forced to liquidate tomorrow, the book value per share theoretically tells us the chunk of net assets left over for each common share, but only after every single other obligation has been fully paid off.
Let's move on to Section 2, the basic calculation. We're going to turn that concept into a formula.
The math here is honestly incredibly straightforward. It's just a simple fraction. Up top, in the numerator, you have the net assets available to common shareholders. Remember, total assets minus total liabilities gets you your net assets, but we have to isolate the portion that belongs exclusively to the common shareholders. Then, right down at the bottom in the denominator, you just spread those available net assets across the number of common shares currently outstanding, and boom, you get a clean per-share dollar amount.
Easy enough, right?
Well, it's not always quite that simple. Let's look at Section 3, Preferred Stock Complications.
So here's where things get a bit tricky, because common shareholders are the residual owners. They get the leftovers, right? Anyone with a superior claim has to get paid first. And preferred shareholders? They absolutely have that superior claim. So if a company has both common and preferred stock outstanding, you've got to adjust that numerator we just talked about. You need to watch out for a few specific hurdles. For instance, is the preferred stock cumulative? Are there dividends in arrears that haven't been paid out yet? If so, you owe those to the preferred shareholders first. What if the preferred stock has participating features? Or, check this out, what if the call price or even the liquidation value is actually higher than the carrying amount of the preferred stock on the books? All of these scenarios represent potential claims by preferred shareholders that you absolutely must subtract out before you can figure out what's truly left for the common stock.
And that brings us to a massive exam tip, and honestly, just a vital real-world tip for financial analysis. Always remove those preferred stock claims from the net assets first. If you forget to back out those cumulative dividends and arrears, or you ignore a higher liquidation value, you're going to artificially inflate the net assets available to common shareholders. Your resulting book value per share will be dead wrong, and you'll end up painting a way rosier picture for the common stock than what's actually based in reality.
All right, having mastered the math, let's shift gears to Section 4, 4 serious limitations. This is exactly why relying too heavily on this metric is super risky.
It really begs the question, right? Is book value a perfect measure of a company's true worth? Like, if a company has a book value of $20 a share, is the stock unequivocally worth $20? No way! Absolutely not. And the reason comes down to the inherent limitations of how accounting actually works. Book value is an accounting creation, and man, it carries some massive blind spots.
Specifically, there are 4 major limitations you absolutely need to know. Number 1, it's based purely on recorded amounts. Number 2, it completely ignores future earnings potential. Number 3, those recorded amounts are heavily subject to accounting estimates. And number 4, it entirely misses hidden liabilities like unrecorded collateral pledges. Let's unpack these really quick to see why book value can fall dramatically short of showing the full financial picture.
The first 2 limitations essentially mean that book value is fundamentally stuck in the past. It's looking backward. It's a valuation based strictly on historical recorded amounts. So, say a company bought a prime piece of real estate 50 years ago. It might be sitting on the books for a tiny fraction of what it's actually worth today. On the flip side, they might have millions recorded for tech equipment that is literally obsolete right now. Plus, and this is a huge one,
Unlike the actual value of a business, book value entirely ignores future earnings potential. You could have a tech startup with almost zero physical assets on the books, leading to a tiny book value, but its software might be primed to generate billions in future revenue. Book value captures literally none of that forward-looking magic.
Now, limitation 3 is fascinating because it brings in the human element. The recorded values of assets are heavily dependent on accounting estimates. Think about depreciation for a second. You could have two identical companies in the same industry choosing totally different depreciation methods for their heavy machinery. One goes aggressive, slashing asset values fast, while the other takes a slow, steady approach. Those subjective choices mean book values can vary wildly, even between similar companies. If management's estimates are inaccurate or just a bit too optimistic, well, your net assets might be totally overstated. Actually, scratch that. It's less of an objective measurement and more of an educated guess.
And that brings us to limitation number 4, the hidden pledges. Imagine a company with a massive fleet of trucks proudly sitting on its balance sheet. That boosts total assets, which drives up the book value. Looks great, right? But wait, what if those exact trucks have been pledged as collateral to secure a massive loan? Under standard accounting rules, a pledge of collateral isn't recorded as a distinct liability on the books. This is a massive blind spot. The book value completely misses this potential claim against the assets. If things go south and the company defaults, those trucks go straight to the bank, not the common shareholders. The true net assets available might be substantially lower than your basic calculation suggests.
Let's wrap things up with Section 5, Book versus Market Value, to put all this into context. We really have to draw a hard line here between what is on the books versus what's happening in the market. Book value is tied to historical cost. Market value, though, reflects future earnings potential and the overall market's assessment. Picture this simple scenario. Company A and Company B both have a book value of exactly $10 per share. But Company A holds a bunch of outdated inventory while Company B just patented some incredibly revolutionary new software. The market might price Company A right at $10, but it might price Company B at $50 a share, giving it a huge market-to-book ratio. The stock market recognizes that Company B's future earning power completely blows the historical cost of its assets out of the water.
Which brings us right back to the value trap we discussed at the very beginning. It is such a common mistake to look at a company where the market price is lower than its book value and immediately jump to, oh, it's an undervalued stock, a screaming buy. No. Given all the limitations we just covered, a high book value relative to market price could actually be a massive red flag. It might just mean the market knows the company has terrible future earnings prospects. Or it might mean the market knows the historical assets on the books are totally overstated because of bad accounting estimates or obsolescence. A high book value isn't always a guaranteed bargain. Sometimes it's a giant warning sign that the books just don't match reality.
So what's the big takeaway here? Look, book value per share is absolutely a foundational metric, but it is just the starting point. It requires you to dig deeper. You have to subtract those preferred claims, and you really need to scrutinize the accounting estimates behind the assets. The next time you see a per-share value thrown around, I want you to ask yourself, what unseen liabilities, unrecorded collateral, or hidden future potential might be lurking right behind those financial statements? Always look past the basic math, question the story behind the numbers, and you will be a far sharper analyst. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.